What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the TDR show. Me and Jay decided this summer that we're going to be bouncing back and forth between Devy, Dynasty every other week. We're just going to be kind of hitting topics as we go through kind of the dog days of June and July as we kind of get through them. But we have a fun one for you today. We're going to be talking about players in Devy that we're fading, our fade list. Players we're not drafted in 2025. Doesn't mean we're not going to trade for them later, though. And it doesn't mean that we didn't draft them last year like idiots, right? If we're already fading them this year, because there's a couple guys on this list that I drafted last year, but guys that we're particularly not drafting for whatever reason. Now, we have a bunch of different reasons on here. We have 6 different reasons of why, hey, we're kind of fading this guy. And remember, it's not about hating these guys or saying these guys aren't good players, because they are all good players. It's just more of a cost versus value type argument, and ADPs and how groupthink's going out there, maybe some red flags that we see in their profiles. So we're going to be diving into a bunch of different players at each position, except for tight end, because tight ends don't matter in Devy. But we're going to be looking at quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, and just talking about certain players that we're really concerned about their profile. Now, if you have them, this is also a conversation we're going to be having. It's like, hey, maybe we should trade them. What's that value look like? Maybe you can flip them for whatever piece is there. Or even if you play a CFF or C2C kind of format, it's the same thing, right? We're still talking about guys that we have concerns about at the next level, which will hurt their upside in those type of leagues as well. So Jay does not like being negative, but I'm forcing him to be negative today. That's the goal here, because I do think there is a lot of positivity out there in terms of prospects and shows and all that stuff. But I think sometimes we forget that, hey, it's not all positive. There are misses. There are problems that we have to have in these profiles. It's not perfect. We don't hate these guys, but we're not loving them this year. That's the part that I want to make sure that you guys understand. So we're going to be hitting all those topics after the intro. Right. So before we get into players, we got to talk about what constitutes a fade, right? Like, why are we fading this guy? Why are we kind of out on these guys? Now, I got a bunch of different ones. I'll throw them out there. Jake can kind of head his way wherever he wants to go. Maybe his one that he's like, yeah, that's the one I'm more concerned with. Maybe I didn't put one on here for him, but overvalued ADP versus projection. That's a pretty easy one. That's the one I'm looking at. Like, hey, man, round 1 ADP based on what I think our projection is, or maybe an analytical approach that Jay has. Like, I'm concerned there. Scheme dependent success. To me, that's a lot of college. Excuse me, I almost just choked there. That's a lot of college guys on the scheme side. The scheme dependent success is like, hey, a Tennessee scheme for quarterbacks. That's one of the reasons why Nico transferred. Not great, right? Or the running back position. What the hell is going on with Georgia running backs just not getting draft capital? Like, so is it a scheme thing, or what is that? What does that success look like? Why are they succeeding so much there? Or is it holding them back a little bit? NFL transition concerns. That's a tape-based analysis. Like, hey, I am worried about his skills going to the next level. That transition, right? Hey, what does that look like? Crowded depth charts. That's always a tough to navigate. Is it a crowded depth chart for a player and he's just, the guys are too much talent ahead of him, and now we're stuck holding the bag like Quentin Martin Jr. from Penn State? We're going to be holding that bag for another year. I just wrote about him in our new article I got coming out soon. Or does he have real skills? We're just waiting, right? Age, injury history. That's a big one, right? 4th-year guys, 5th-year kids, or that injury history pops up. We're going to be talking about some injuries today that you might not be aware of how extensive they were. And then lack of elite traits. That could also be transition concerns, but just guys out there that we're not really, like, maybe they hit, maybe they don't, but those elite traits aren't there where we're really comfortable drafting at that point in terms of whatever round they're going in. Maybe they're averaging a bunch of stuff, but we're worried that round, that running back's going to get round 2. No, he's not. He's going to get round 4, 5th, 6th capital. Now we're really concerned about that elite traits there. Jay, anything to add on all of those, or one of those, or where are you at in terms of this fade list?
When I think about this list, I can name a few players for each single one of these check marks. And so, like, that's the thing in Devy is it's not a sure thing. We put a lot of analysis and emphasis on trying to figure out these things from a metrics perspective. Who is the most likely to succeed in these scenarios and through this situations. But the problem is that the hit rate on these things is not that great. And there's lots of reasons why you all these reasons up here that it doesn't work out. I'd actually maybe even break out age and injury history into two separate categories, because I look at
Yeah.
age. I think that's really, really important. We're going to talk about that with a couple of the guys here, but injury history and age, I think, are very important. And then the top one to me, like the value one, is probably, I talk about that on the Dynasty one, but that's something that's really hard to grasp. And we're not saying that any of these players are bad. It's just like the point here that you're making is, if you have to draft them in the first round, given their probability of success, maybe it's not the best bet. Maybe you can take somebody that has a slightly higher probability, that plays a different position, or a position that maybe could get some value or something like that. But I think a lot of times in Devy realms, we get all excited about this new player, this player that could become something, but we forget that there's a probability that he also doesn't become that thing. And there's lots of reasons why that happens over time. But a great list. Again, each one of these things makes, you can think of a few players for each one of these check marks up here, as you go through the years in playing Devy.
It's funny you said that, because as I was going through when I was doing this, I was like, shit. Oh man, Damon DeMoss, what did you do to me, son? Why did you hurt me? Journey Brown, right? Injury. I mean, do you remember Journey Brown? If you're out there listening to us, if you're in a Devy guy, Penn State running back, I thought he was the next everything. Like, that kid was phenomenal. Then an injury wipes him out. Kaytron Boutte, look what happened to him. And we can go back and back and back further. Justin Blackman, like, there are plenty of guys quarterback wise. I mean, you could go back. A lot of these things happen. Now, it might be one thing. Like, it might be one thing we can pinpoint. And I think we are getting better at fading guys based on certain profiles, but we are also considerably still stupid about the guys too. Like, when I look at and that's how it happens too, because you see NFL traits. And just for a recent example, Mika Hudson. I mean, we talked about him on Discord recently. I mean, he has traits that translate to NFL, but it's the other stuff. It's the head stuff. It's the depth chart stuff. It's the where he went as a prospect. Like, and I do have that running joke a little bit sometimes in the Discord. Like, I'll get asked a player. I got asked about Nick Marsh today. Hey, what do you think of him on all this stuff? And my comment was, I'm going to love him at Alabama next year, because I would love to see him at Alabama, not at Michigan State. Because for me, like, I want to see them guys, these guys improve. Look what happened with Jameson Williams when he goes to Alabama. Like, there's kind of stuff that you have to think about in terms of Devy realms of why we're moving on. So I think that's a good breakdown. I think that's a good point. Now we're going to start with quarterbacks. Let's get into some quarterbacks here. And my big thing with quarterbacks is they're considerably hard to judge. All right. Where are they at in terms of, where's the prospects at? You have to use a lot. And I'm going to be on the forefront. I have done more scouting in quarterbacks this offseason than I have ever done at this point of the offseason. So I've written a ton of profiles on 2026 guys. I have one coming out, depending on when you're listening it, on Sam Leavitt, Arizona State quarterback. I've done Fernando Mendoza already, Garrett Nussmeier, who we're going to talk about right now, Drew Aller, Lenore Sellers, Cade Klubnik. I've really dived deep into these guys. I'm talking 2,000 to 5,000 words, depending on what it is, tape, grinded, and done these things. So as far as background goes, especially with the 2026 guys, I feel more comfortable talking about these guys than I ever have before. So with that said, Garrett Nussmeier to me is a fade right now. And I think I go back and forth on this because I do think he has translatable traits. So when you're going over what Garrett did last year, obviously, he's the fifth-year kid coming in this year. Many thought he was going to leave last year. He did have 4,000 yards, the 29 touchdowns last year. And he's in a great offense, right? He has an LSU offense there. He's got Joe Sloan there really developing him. So you're going to see that. Like, you're seeing development. You saw it last year. He's going to get the reps that he needs. He's sitting at 6'2", 200. That 200 mark you're okay with. You want to see maybe a little bit bigger than that. But from a quarterback standpoint, why am I fading? So right now he's going as QB5 overall, which scares the hell out of me in round 2. It's a dark zone of quarterbacks that I don't necessarily want to draft at that point. And for me, it's the NFL translation skills. How is that going to go? The transition to the NFL. So when I go through his strengths, throws with anticipation, scans the field well, gets the ball out quick, natural arm talent. He has all those things. But over time, when you start doing these things, you start seeing like, all right, what does he not do well? Well, pocket pressure needs work. Like when he is under pressure, his is, PFF passing grade 60.9. He's got 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He looks really, really bad. 50% completion percentage. That makes me nervous. He had 18 turnover worthy plays last year in 2024. My biggest concern with his overall profile is that. Now, can he get better? Of course he can get better. But if the pocket pressure needs work in the SEC and you're worried about that, that's not going to translate very well to the NFL side. His deep ball, very inconsistent at times. I think he takes deep shots, but it almost looks labored. There's times where I'm like, where is he going with that ball? And I think it limits your offensive ceiling. I think he's more of a kind of a West Coast style quarterback. He has arm talent, but that inconsistency from just that, that accuracy is a problem. And he doesn't really have, and this, I could have put this as well, he lacks some high-end tools for me. He's no elite trait as a quarterback. He's good across the board. Like athleticism is fine. Arm strength's pretty good. He's got some creativity when he needs to, but gosh, he checks some boxes, but he doesn't elevate your ceiling as an offense, in my opinion. Now, he could get better, but he's just sitting in that dead zone of quarterbacks at QB5 overall. I just don't want based on their ADP.
Yeah, and a lot of that resonates. And first of all, I'd say all these profiles that Kevin does on the Substack, in the Discord and through the Patreon are amazing. Go grab them. That little summary that Kevin just gave, there it's times a million in those types of in those articles. So definitely worth the price to go and read all those quarterback profiles and the many more profiles to come before the season starts. From a data perspective, I think Nussmeier was the most surprising as I throw them into my index and get ready for the 2026 season. It was the most surprising quarterback in terms of how it didn't actually play out with what matches up with what the draft capital is. So right now, if you go to mock draft database, he's at the 3rd overall pick right now. That's where he's getting drafted. He's getting drafted top 5 over and over again in a lot of these mock drafts. But if you actually go and look at the numbers, yes, he had 4,000 yards passing. Yes, he had 300 some yards per game. But from an age-adjusted perspective, if you're looking at things like QBR, EPA per play, adjusted yards per attempt, rush yards market share, all of those things that I look at on an age-adjusted basis, which you want to try and get certain levels based on how old you are. In his 4th year, he didn't meet any of those things. So those age-adjusted, those experience-adjusted metrics that I'm looking for that I think then translate to predictiveness in terms of how successful you'll be in the NFL, he's not hitting on a lot of those things. And that's the most surprising part. So you're sort of marrying this process. My process weights the draft capital the highest, but it also weights production quite high as well. And so you got the draft capital as high as you can be in this class, and the production is low. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't knock the ball out of the park in year 5 here, and he doesn't get above the line, but his production grade is still going to be over the course of those 5 years, not just the 4 years that we've seen, or not just the last year. It's all 5 years, and how does that play together? And yes, you see players like Joe Burrow out of LSU, you see Jaden Daniels, and I'm not saying that Nussmeier is of those elite levels, but certainly could he have a great year at LSU with the pass catching talent around him? Yes, he could have another 4,000 plus year, and it looks really, really good. The thing is, you just don't see it. There's a couple other things I'd mention here. His adjusted completion percentage, as I try and scroll through my spreadsheet here, his adjusted completion percentage throughout his 4 years is, I look for above 72, and that's being generous. I'm trying to get players that have higher adjusted completion percentage. But last year, his big year was a 71.4%. So he doesn't even hit that sort of like generous type of threshold that I look for. And for his career, 70.3%. Now it's not in the 60s, and that would be maybe like more of a warning sign. It's kind of like barely missing a threshold here, but that's just something to think about in that great year. You miss it by a little bit, but really you want to see them quite a bit higher from that perspective. So, for Nussmeier, not hitting those type of experience adjusted metrics, maybe some of the other type of metrics that you look for in terms of like, completion percentage, adjusted completion percentage, stuff like that, maybe not as high as you'd like to see it. And so the whole point here is we got to we got a QB that's being mock draft in the top 5, sometimes the first overall quarterback. There's a lot of expectation here. And what I would say is, from a data perspective, it was surprisingly not as good as you'd hope for in that type of scenario. Him being a 5th-year guy, all of the sort of knocks that you can say from the numbers perspectives, it was a little bit surprising. And so what I would say is just a little bit cautious on this. He's not a sure thing to be that savior that you need for the QB, your superflex QB position. Yeah, maybe you want to take a shot on him every once in a while, but just be cautious because it's not a perfect profile here.
No, one thing to just mention. So here's his ADP. So here's in terms of where his ADP is going around. Now, forefront, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed to our Patreon or Substack, one thing you should know is that we hate quarterbacks so much that it does seep into our ADP a little bit. So there is we have this thing about how you just miss so much. So that is also why you're going to see second round, because Nussmeier might be going in the first round in a lot of Devy drafts out there that don't subscribe to us, because there are still people out there think Superflex QB is king. Devy, that's where you should go, which is the wrong way of thinking, in my opinion, right? I could be wrong, but that's just how we go. He is still going ahead of, in our ADP, in our drafts that we do, he's still going ahead of Bryce Underwood, which I don't want to draft a freshman quarterback either, but I would rather take a shot on Bryce Underwood's profile in that round than I would with Garrett Nussmeier. Drew Aller and him are going kind of back to back, and I would still rather lean Drew Aller based on the tape, based on my profile of Drew Aller. And then some other guys going around him: Nate Frazier, running back out of Georgia, DeCorian Moore, Oregon wide receiver, Ryan Wingo, Texas wide receiver, Caden Durham, LSU running back, Julian Sayin from Ohio State quarterback. He's going a little later, but just to give you guys context there, I would pretty much take any of those guys, right? I'm very comfortable with that. Maybe Nate Frazier, you're like, hey, your Georgia running back. He was a guy I almost put on this list, but I'm not fading because I did draft him, and I didn't want to lie out there to my listeners out here because I have drafted him this offseason. But I would say, just based on that, looking at kind of where the ADP is at, it just doesn't justify. Not that I don't like Garrett, not that I don't think he can maybe have a good year. Maybe he does bounce back and then he's a first round quarterback. I just look at it like, hey, I'd be willing to move him. And that's what we have our ranking sheet for. We have a calculator on there. If you want to know kind of what that would look like, you could go plug him in and go look at some Dynasty guys or some other guys that maybe you can move off of them. I think this is a perfect opportunity to kind of move off of them there. All right. Sam Leavitt, quarterback at Arizona State, made the list here. I just finished his profile. So I just did it. It is out. If you watch this on a Monday, if you're listening to this on the podcast on Sunday night, it will be out tomorrow. I would definitely go take a look. It's probably my favorite one so far I've done. I had a little bit more time for this one in terms of just really sitting down, writing a lot more. So when I'm looking at Sam Leavitt's profile, he came out of nowhere last year at Arizona State. We saw what he did going to the playoff, won the Big 12. 216 for 350. He had 2,800 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 443 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. And he came out of nowhere, right? He obviously transferred from Michigan State to Arizona State. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he's still young. So I do want to, preface that right now. He is still young. He's going at QB6 overall, right behind Nussmeier in that range. So he's going kind of, depending on where you look at the ADP, he is going in terms of, in that realm. Round 2-ish, late round 2-ish. That's kind of depending on the drafts that you're in. For us, or for me, my fade is overvalued ADP versus projection, right? Because when you're looking at Leavitt's profile and you go through kind of what Sam Leavitt is, he's fine. He's a very solid quarterback. The thing that stands out to me is hey, Kenny Dillingham has done an amazing job with that offense, right? Another thing, Marcus Arroyo really turned around that offense as well. He trusts him in terms of his quarterback play. Drew Ward, his quarterback's coach, has talked about how mental he is. He's just a physical, but it's mental. He has a mental capability. The best part of his profile, and this is where I'm going to struggle, Jay, because it's hard to quantify with these quarterbacks. Decision-making, ball security is amazing. He does a great job there. And his pre-snap processing, post-snap execution is amazing. Intangibles of leadership is amazing. So, he checks all that box. He's got the Brock Purdy box. Hey, he makes the right read. He checks down. He does everything you asking him to do. And he's athletic. I mean, not Brock. Brock's not athletic. But Leavitt's got that rushing upside. He's got that playmaking ability. He can extend plays. He does great stuff. but the arm is just not there. It's just not there. The size durability concerns the hell out of me. 6'2", 200, but he did not hold up last year. He only had 4 games with more than 30 pass attempts last year. And when you're looking at that game against Texas, he threw it 45 times, but he was fatigued, man. That game against Texas, he struggled. And I hate to use one game against him too. That's what I also wrote about. I said, hey, if you're just going to use one game, you're not doing it right. But I think the arm strength he struggles with. Most of his passes are 0 to 19 yards. I did a screenshot of PFF numbers. You could go check that out in the article. But you can really tell that, like, basically once it gets 20 yards or more, he struggles in terms of, where he's trying to get the football, in terms of where they were accurate. And he doesn't do it a lot, right? He only had he's 18 for 56 at that range. That's not great. I think that from an arm level and a competition level and a ball placement level, he's a day 2 kid. From an intangibles level, a guy that wants to be your quarterback and a guy that you can rally around your team, he's a round 1 kid. So his profile scares the shit out of me, Jay, because I love what he does on the intangible stuff, but from the arm stuff and from just like the film-based stuff there, and if that's a profile, I don't want to draft that profile. I think it's an overvalued ADP versus what we can. He might come back another year. It's not a guarantee he comes out this year. Maybe the Big 12 figures him out. He did only have 2,800 yards passing. He doesn't have Cam Scatterbo again this year, where they really lean on him heavy. There's a lot of things going through my mind there in terms of Leavitt. What do you think about this kid?
Yeah, so I say going into the summer, but after hearing this, I'm not sure. But going into the summer, I was pretty high on Leavitt. And, he's a younger kid. So if he comes out next year, he'll be an early declare. In terms of those experience adjusted or age adjusted metrics that I brought up for Garrett Nussmeier, Sam Leavitt met all of those thresholds for his year 2. In fact, Sam Leavitt's in year 2 beat Garrett Nussmeier on nearly everything. So if you look at QBR, he was in the low 80s and Nussmeier was 79. EPA per play, he was 0.38. And Nussmeier was 0.36. So this is comparing a guy in year 2 versus a guy in year 4 at LSU. And he's beating and he's getting these production metrics. So that all stands out as something that's pretty good. The passing for 217 yards per game and rushing for 40 yards per game, that's pretty decent. The rushing piece is actually something that stands out to me as something that's pretty good. I like that. The 2 points that I'd make here is, looking at the PFF metrics out there, the big time throw percentage, 3.6% last year. My threshold is about 4%. He does not hit that. And I think what you said about those targets being in the short ranges, that big time throw percentage is measuring the percentage of, NFL level, NFL like throws. And it's a pretty low percentage there. So he's not getting that credit of NFL level throws, and it's showing up in the numbers at 3.6%. It's not a 1%. It's close to the 4%, but the threshold's there for a reason, so it's not quite there. The other thing that I'd mention is the time to throw. One of the thresholds I have there for time to throw is over 3. And he's his first year and his second year, mostly second year, he was 3.04 for his career at 3.05. That's one of those things that's like a negative detractor, a red flag. And sometimes you see that when you have rushing QBs, they hold on to the ball a little bit longer. And he's obviously proved that he does rush the ball for about 40 yards per game. But it does signify a red flag in terms of going on to the NFL. You get those guys that hold on to the ball just a little bit too long and they can't get over that. They can't adjust when they go to the NFL. And this is one of those ones that is flagging here. So let's say he goes off and has another great year, puts up a great numbers, and he's able to get that time to throw down and his big time throw percentage up. I'm going to like that a lot, but I'm just pointing out there are holes, there are red flags in the process if you go past just looking at experience adjusted metrics, because he does hit that in year 2. He didn't, obviously in year 1 that was a no, but in year 2 he hits that, and that's kind of what you're looking for. That's what you're asking for. But there are some things, the time to throw, the big time throws, that stand out to me as as watch items for this season.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. This is what I like. Me and Jay did not talk about what our analysis is going to be with these guys. I didn't know if Jay was going to agree with me or not, right? So really, it's just based on a film and like an analytics thing. So I like when those things mirror each other because, and you guys might not believe us, but I swear to God, we don't talk about this. I like to have just like, all right, Jay, what do you think here? What is your stuff telling you? And do I need to look at it again, right? So like, I do think your point. I know he holds the ball too long. 100%. He holds the ball too long. Part of that is the offense, and part of that is the rushing upside with him and everything there. But he definitely does, right? And like, so I think that's the point. And you just hit on something very good. You're saying, hey, he hits the age adjusted stuff, but there's other holes in the profile. What you're doing in this format is finding the holes. Like that's what you want to find. You got to find the holes. Now, whether you think those holes are good or bad, that's up to you to decide. Like, oh, well, all right. Yes, I don't like that he doesn't have his big time throws, but hey, I'm okay to live with that as a first year starter. There's context behind that. That's okay. If that's the way you want to go, find the holes and then say, okay, those are the holes that I'm like, yeah, I'm not going by that hole. Like that's a hole. And I think for me, my biggest hole with Sam Leavitt is his deep ball passing and his translatable traits as an NFL guy. However, I go back to the conversation we had in our Discord, and we talked about scouting and quarterbacks and saying, hey, it's less about the QB in terms of arm talent all the time. It's here. It's in the head. If you're listening on podcasts, I know that's a terrible. I just pointed my head. So, you're thinking of like, hey, it's here. He's got that. He really does. So like he could develop. He's young. He has those areas. I just am fading him this year. I'm just not. I am at QB6 is way too rich for me, right? Like that is way too rich. He was not getting drafted last year. If you picked him up somehow last year, you're excited with that. I would say that and I talked about this in the article in CFF C2C, I'm a little less concerned because I think he's going to come back another year. So like you get another year of production. There's some value there. There's definitely like, hey, maybe he does develop. Like there's less risk there than drafting a guy like Nussmeier, who, if that's what he gets to you in those type of formats, you struggle with that a little bit. Any final thing on Leavitt before we move on?
I would just say I like Leavitt. I want him at a value. I don't want to overpay, and that's the point. And so if their drumbeat gets really high on him, and you could see him start moving up ADP, that's when you don't want to be there. And if for whatever reason he starts moving down ADP, and you can get him for value, you can trade for him for a value, I'm okay taking a shot, but generally we don't like the QBs, but it's an okay profile to bet on. You just don't want to put too much price into it. You want to get them at the value. This is not the one that you want to overpay for. You don't want to give away all your future just to make the bet on this guy.
This next one will be quick because I want nothing to do with him. Carson Beck, Miami quarterback, 6'4", 220, coming from Georgia. Last 2 years, basically averaged around 3,700 yards passing. In those 2 seasons, he had 24 touchdowns in 2023. 24, he had 28 touchdowns. 6 interceptions in 2023. 12 this last year. Then he tore his UCL. He had to have the surgery on his elbow. For me, big fade is lack of elite traits, age, injury history, both. You just combine them there. I know he's going to Miami, and I swear to God, Jay, if I have to read another article about how Cam Ward went to Miami and was the first overall pick, he's not Cam Ward. Cam Ward was a much better quarterback than Carson Beck was. And Carson Beck struggled at Georgia. Like he really struggled over last season. He was really bad. Like when you're looking at like what he was last year, he really struggled in terms of that. There was games where PFF credited it's pretty high in terms of like, passing grade and all of that. But a lot of that definitely had to do with the weapons around him. A lot of that had to do with kind of Georgia, just being Georgia and that defense and those type of things. I think he struggled at times in the SEC, and I think Georgia fans were kind of excited that he was out, right? I mean, 9-3 last year is not going to do it when you're thinking of what he was. Obviously, he did not look great against that game against Texas. I just don't see it, so I'm just not touching it. I know last year he was like QB1 and QB2, so your hope is he just shows something. I'm unloading this guy. I don't want Carson Beck on any of my rosters.
Yeah, in the spirit of keeping it short and sweet, if you can't do it in 6 years after, how are you gonna do it in the NFL? I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. He might be more of a product of environment. There's some good players that were at Georgia, and that maybe that explains why he did so well during those particular years. But yeah, I don't see it. If you can get something good for him, the reason we have him in here, and he's fallen quite a bit. The reason we have him in here is that, if you're not, in this Devy on a day-to-day basis, doing the mock drafts in there, you might have a view of Carson Beck that's different than, the people that are seeing kind of where his value is. And, from our perspective, we want to kind of avoid this player. If you drafted him a couple of years ago, try and get something good for him. And if you can't, move him for something a little bit less than that. But yeah, I guess that's the point. I mean, we don't want him on our squads.
I was about to say, I will take whatever I could get for Carson Beck. Like, it doesn't have to be good. You give me something average, above average, right? That's how I got my wife. It can happen, all right? Like, that's just how it happens there. You could take that. And I think you hit it on the head, too, in terms of what, like, Carson Beck is. To me, it's just you stay away, older prospect. I don't know. Miami's offense is going to be a mess, I think. They got to have some guys step up in that room, and I hope they do. I hope JoJo Trader steps up, right? I hope those guys kind of step up for him. But for me, I'm just out. I'm just out on Carson Beck. All right, let's go to the running back position. So this one's a lot of fun, I think, because we're going different here. First one we're going to start with is running back Kaytron Allen from Penn State. We've been talking about Kaytron Allen, Jay, for way too long, feels like. I feel like we've been talking about this guy for a while. He's a senior at Penn State, 5'11", 230-ish, 229. Over the last 3 years, he's been very solid, right? So here's what his numbers were for the last 3 years in terms of yards. His freshman year was 867, 902, and then 1,100 yards last year as a junior. He's averaged about 5 yards a carry. He's, when you're looking at his career total for touchdowns, is at 24. He's not really a pass catcher in terms of what he does. He's a thumper. He's just a thumper. That's what he is. He's a thumper, downhill runner. ADP right now still is in the 4th round. My big problem with Kaytron Allen is obviously Nick Singleton is the guy. He's going to split time there. I could have put Crowder to depth chart. Honestly, I think Quentin Martin Jr. is better than Kaytron Allen as a runner. I know that's not going to happen because James Franklin, and he's not going to give up that time because he had Allen come back. But I do think that he just lacks elite traits. I just don't. He's fine. He's a fine running back, but he screams day 3 running back. Am I wrong? Do you see day 2 at all with this kid?
No, I think that's exactly right. And the term thumper is, I think, the moniker or whatever you want to maybe associate with him, because I think a lot of times we saw him and Nick Singleton come into the Penn State's offense at the same time. They both had really good freshman years, and at that time it was hard. Maybe for some people it was hard to kind of parse. Well, if I don't get Nick Singleton, Kaytron Allen did just as good as him. And from that perspective. And over the last 2 years, I think we have a really good idea of what Kaytron Allen is. You mentioned not really a pass catcher, kind of a thumper, but it shows in the data as well. In terms of the experience adjusted metrics, he hit on all that stuff on year 1, or most of that stuff in year 1, but the last 2 years, he hasn't been hitting on the market share metrics, on the efficiency metrics. So it's just not coming through in the data. Now, what's really funny is all 3 years he's averaged about 70 yards per game, a little less than 70 yards per game. So he's just like very, very consistent. Each year, it's almost like it's the same running back, the same stats from year to year to year to year. And you'd like to see some of that like improvement, some of that just increase in but we talked about yards per attempt, 5 yards per attempt, but it's been so consistent, 5.2, 5.2, 5. Just he's the same guy every single year, but it's not special. The yards after contact per attempt is not special. The missed tackles forced is not special. The breakaway percentage is not special. The elusive rating is not special. All that stuff. It's just like average plotter type of stuff. And maybe if he had if he would test off the charts in terms of like athleticism or something like that, maybe he could shoot up boards a little bit. But to me, this profile doesn't scream incredible athleticism either as well. So it's 220 pounds, 30 BMI. That's nice. You love to see that from an NFL running back. But does he give you anything special to make him get a day 2 draft capital? And I don't see it. I think it's a day 3 type of guy. That's how my process would work out. And right now on mock draft database, he's going at 103. So it's, kind of at the top end of there. But I see that him sort of being sort of a loser throughout the draft evaluation process. But for any of these guys, they could go off. say Nick Singleton gets injured and they rely on Kaytron Allen a lot, and he puts up just like crazy numbers in terms of accounting stats wise, but it still doesn't look that great from an efficiency perspective. Maybe there's a scenario, but this profile does not like scream, I must have on my team. I'd rather fade him. I'd rather trade him for something else, especially to players or dynasty managers that kind of think of Kaytron Allen as sort of that, well, I didn't get Nick Singleton, now I can have Kaytron Allen type of range. I'd love to move him to that guy.
Yeah, there's some guys going after him. Like, and again, this is probably, we haven't had a Devy draft this month. So like Harlem Berry, I would definitely take the true freshman at LSU way ahead of Kaytron Allen. Jaden Ott, Oklahoma running back, I would take Jaden Ott over him. Quentin Martin Jr., his teammate, who I still believe, like there's still hope there based on every read. He's going later. I would rather take a shot because in Devy, you don't get points anyway. So you don't get return on investment anyway with these guys. So what you're looking for is upside traits. Quentin Martin Jr., even though he hasn't had the numbers that Allen has more upside to the NFL. I think sometimes that's the hard thing to do with Devy is understanding kind of like, yeah, Quentin Martin Jr. has not played. I think he's got 46 yards or something like that. But I'd rather take a shot on his NFL traits than Kaytron Allen, who could just be a day 3 plotter, right? Jaden Bach, I think it's how you say it, Florida running back. Bryson Washington, we've mentioned him in our 2026 mock. Jordan Marshall, running back out of Michigan. Like, there's guys later that I'm like, yeah, I would take their profile. I'm totally okay with that. Another guy getting slept on, Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams out of Notre Dame. Both those guys later, way later in the draft, where I'm like, oh, I'll take a shot there. Kaytron to me is just a stay away. There's a lot of wide receivers in that range too that I'd rather take a shot on and kind of go through there. And yeah, I'm glad the profile makes sense for both of us in our minds, kind of what that looks like. Next guy could be controversial, Jay, because it's a guy that we like, but he's injured. CJ Baxter, Texas running back, 6'1", 220. True freshman, came in 2023, got thrown right into action. Boom, he was in the action because they needed him. They had a bunch of injuries out there. He had 138 attempts, 659 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Next year, they kind of thought he was going to be their guy. Like, they looked at it and it could have been him. Obviously, though, that didn't pan out last year because before the season, he tore his lateral collateral ligament, his LCL, and his PCL in his right knee. It was a non-contact drill. And I do want to understand that, like, it's actually a rougher injury than I thought, Jay. So I was listening to the Cover 3 podcast on the Texas Cover 3, the Back to School podcast. They were talking about it with the beat reporter out there, and he mentioned something that just caught my eye. He was like, or caught my ear, not my eye. I don't even have 2 eyes right now. So he caught my ear. He said something like, "Well, Baxter's not back yet." And I don't know if people understand how severe that injury was. And I was like, "Ooh. Oh, I didn't listen to that." So I went to 247 Sports. I was kind of looking it up. And I think he's not going to start the season. Like, I think based on everything I read, he's not going to start the season. And that doesn't even count who they got out there. I mean, Contrarian Wisner is probably going to be their guy. He's a very, very solid back. Then you got Jared Gibson, who we both liked as true freshman last year. He was a true freshman last year coming in there. Christian Clark as well. They've got some other guys coming in there. Simon. They have some other guys in that room where Baxter just, I mean, I even wrote about him for the Substack this week on Devy Players Revisited. And I mean, this could be a transfer. I mean, Baxter might be looking at it like this year, he's just not going to get that run and he's moving on. So I think for me, the crowded depth chart is the reason why I'm fading, but also that injury history. If that knee is really that bad, that's a problem. And I cannot believe his ADP. I mean, he's going pretty high. He's going 2nd round, 3rd round, running back 7-ish, running back 8. Way too high for a guy that the beat reporters are all telling me that he might not be able to go the season, and that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And it's just sad. I mean, to listen to you hear that, say that there was such promise there and that he got off to a really hot start at Texas. And, you know, injuries are just terrible. I wish they would never happen, but it happened in this case and might be worse than you're thinking. And, you know, usually, you know, you think about Dynasty, you think about a player goes down preseason with an ACL or knee injury or something like that. You expect him probably to be back playing that next year, but maybe like not at as high percentage, maybe 50% of what you would expect, maybe 70, 80%. I don't know. Some players get back really, really fast with the way that they treat and rehab from these injuries. And then the year after that, maybe year 2 after the injury, they're back to full steam and stuff like that. But when you go and you hear about like it maybe being more serious than you thought it was, and you have to extend that timeline, and maybe people don't quite know about that quite yet, and you're still drafting him in the second round. I think the point you made about the crowded backfield is actually also really, really important to this situation, because Trey Wisner had a really good year last season for Texas. He really stepped up in there. Not a terrible profile either. He doesn't get the draft love, but it's not actually from a production perspective. It wasn't a very terrible profile. So Trey Wisner is somebody that's in the fold to be Texas running back, which is always translated to be at least some consideration for the NFL. And then you talk about the young guys. Jarrett Gibson played a little bit last year, and James Simon coming in this year, and maybe some other players in there as well. But it just makes for a tough slog. And yes, CJ Baxter was the guy. He did get in there his freshman year. We were he has talent oozing from him. I was so excited about him. He was my RB1 for this year that he came out as a freshman. It's just sad that injuries have to be a part of this, and it's not, and a crowded room has to be part of this, because I'm rooting for him. I'm cheering for him. I just can't pay the second round ADP yet if you can get him at a value. I don't know. This might be one of those fade type of situations until you see him actually on the field producing type of thing. So I'm not even sure if you take him, maybe you take a shot on somebody else right now.
This is a fade till next year when he's not getting drafted at all. And like, then he pops off and then he has that year. Right. But I just, he hits a lot of boxes that I get worried about. Severe injury with Wisner. I think his name is Wisner. I'm going to get made fun of in the Discord for not knowing how to pronounce that, but Wisner, he's legit. He's a legit running back at that position. He's got to be talked about more. Like, I know he's their starter, right? So when you're thinking of like what that looks like, to me, like I just get nervous. And when I hear the stuff from the people that cover the team for their job every single day, I mean, that's their job. That's part of it. Like, they have to get that stuff right. And they talk about it. Just a lot of red flags for me. And he's getting drafted too high. That's really where it's at there. All right. Wide receivers. We got 2 of them that we wanted to kind of mention before we wrap up the show. First one is Concepcion Jr., 5'11", 187. Was at NC State the last 2 years. Had a very, very good freshman year. 71 catches, 839 yards, 10 touchdowns. 320 yards rushing as well. Was really kind of their playmaking guy. Last year, did play in 12 games, but had a really down year. NC State's offense was a mess, but 53 catches, 460 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's currently going in the 3rd round, and now he's at Texas A&M. So he transferred there. Here's kind of what that room looks like right now. Mario Craver was a transfer. Terry Bussey's over there. Casey's in there. Jonah Wilson is a transfer. Isaiah Williams, Ashton Betha-Roman, Jerome Miles, 2 true freshmen that everybody kind of loves. 4 or 5-star kid, depending on what services you look at. Kelson Johnson's another true freshman out there. They've been really touting Isaiah Williams. I wrote about him in our Substack on the 247 reports. They really like this kid. And I think that's a guy to watch. But for KC, I think the thing with him is, crowded depth chart, scheme, QB issue I put on here because of Marcel Reed. I know that Christian likes Marcel a little bit more than I do, but I worry about what that offense is going to look like. For me, it's Mike Elko and Kleiman's there. It's going to be heavy run, Ruben Owens, Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, even EJ Smith's legitimate running back. I think they got a 4-headed monster there. So from a production standpoint, I don't know if he's going to hit those metrics either. I'm just kind of staying away based on the 3rd round. I mean, there's some legit dudes going in that third round, 3rd, 4th round that you could really kind of get that I'd be much more like Eric Singleton Jr., for example. We'll talk about him, ironic, or we won't actually, we almost did. But he's going a little bit later. Antonio Williams from Clemson, a guy that me and Jay both think are getting slept on a little bit. Jacoby Lane, Khalil Lockett. I mean, there's guys going later that you could really, really take a shot on that you might be able to get a lot of value back. Even Eugene Wilson is kind of going around. Casey Concepcion, Nick Marsh is around that range. Makai Lemon is another guy that I'd probably rather take a shot on here. So to me, Casey's just a fade for me. There's a lot of receivers that look like Casey Concepcion, and you just have to determine which ones you like and which ones you don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. The 187 pounds, that kind of sort of scares me. The other thing I'd say is a lot of things are about momentum and trends and stuff like that. And when you get transfers, you get new situations and everything. So, you take this with a grain of salt. But first year was really, really good. Second year was a step down. So, you have really great experience adjusted metrics. You have really good metrics throughout your process in year one. Year two, step down. Oh, well, where did the momentum go for this player? So now he's got to build it back up. Those Devy drafters that drafted him after his first year that were super excited are now much less excited. So his value is tapered a little bit, but it's still good enough to be going in the third round in these Devy mocks. The other concern besides the weight is the ADOT. The ADOT is a 7.8. You see certain players use certain ways, but over time, some guys become like screen guys, so their ADOT's really, really low. But if you have a really, really low ADOT, it is something that does concern you in terms of how you're going to produce in the NFL. It has to be married with a really, really high yak per reception. And his average yak per reception is a 6.3, so it's up there. But last year it was just a 5. So last year he had a 6.9 ADOT, so he was 7 ADOT plus a 5 yak per reception. That's getting into the like the danger zone of this is not like translatable type of stuff here. So the hope is that ADOT jumps up back up. Yak is what we saw his first year. Well, basically the hope is that he produces a lot like he did in year one versus year two. So year one, if we get that in year three, if we get a little bit better than year one, we're going to be excited. If we get what we saw in year two, in year three, then it's like it's just a worry, the momentum, the trend, that kind of thing is not safe. So marry the 187 pounds with the very, very low ADOT that I see at 7.8, last year being 7. Those are the things that concern me in terms of, is this an NFL type of wide receiver? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find guys that the NFL is going to draft high and they're going to get used. And so those are the worry points for me on KC.
So question for you, just off the top. Would rather, so if you're in a Devy draft, let's say he slips to the 4th round, like just in terms, it's hard with ADP in my mind, but you'd rather have Mylan Graham from Ohio State, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it's a question because, you got that true freshman. You don't know what that production is going to look like this year. You're projecting. But the reason why I ask you it is because to me, when I'm looking at Devy, I take the shot on Mylan Graham, Ohio State, everything coming out there, the value riser of him. I mean, we're talking about Mylan Graham being a round 2 guy next year or late first guy. Like there's things that could happen where there's an avenue and there's a path where that could go. Like you said, if Concepcion has another year like last year, this kid's going back to Texas A&M and they're going to get tons of transfers again like they do because they open the checkbooks and now you're just left holding the bag. So to me, Mylan Graham is the shinier bag, but a bag that can accumulate value where Concepcion's kind of maxed out a little bit.
Yeah, I'll say that perfectly. And I think, that gets into, taking the 5th best wide receiver at Ohio State or the 4th best or 3rd best wide receiver at Ohio State versus the best wide receiver at Texas A&M or somewhere else. How you think about that type of strategy. But Mylan Graham, from what I hear, is looking really, really good. He looked really good in spring ball. He is going to be something that's pretty good. Him and Quincy Porter, they'll see the field. Maybe they aren't starting right away, but they'll see the field throughout this season. And I'm excited for their potential. And I think you said it right. It's the potential of shooting for that guy that can get you to the second round, the first round in Devy ADP, because they have that tremendous NFL type upside type of thing.
Yeah, 100%. All right, last guy. You wanted to include him, so I'm going to let you kind of bag on a little bit, but I'll give everybody the background here. Nick Anderson, LSU wide receiver, transfer from Oklahoma. He had a lot of love out there from a lot of people in Devy for a long time. Just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Basically 2022, nothing. 2023 is probably the year he played the most. He had 38 catches, 98 yards, and 10 touchdowns. So that's where that optimism came for. Last year, didn't play again. He didn't transfer to LSU. I mean, he's a big boy, 6'4", 220. I mean, he doesn't have that concern with KC Concepcion. But when you're looking at LSU's roster, I think you can make an argument that he's the fourth best wide receiver on that team. So Aaron Anderson's there, Barry Brown, transfer from Kentucky, Chris Hilton Jr. It's still Chris Hilton Jr., right? Or did Chris? Yeah,
Yeah, he's still there.
I mix those guys up because they had the same profile. Rest in peace, Kyron Lacey. So Chris Hilton Jr., Xavier Thomas is there. They still have Destin Hill, transfer from Florida State. He was definitely toolsy. I don't know what the hell he's going to be at LSU. But when you're looking at that, I mean, he could be the first best. He could be the best wide receiver of that team. I definitely could see that, right? Or he could be the fourth. So there's a ton of just red flags here. What are we doing with him? He's the ADP's 5th round, so definitely a little lower. People are a little bit worried, or more worried now. But where are you at with Nick?
So 6'4", 220 is very intriguing for me, and I can understand where the intrigue is. Draft capital of 48, so pick 48, so you're getting second round draft capital right now. Yeah, exactly. Year 2 was really good. He hit on those experience adjusted metrics, but my point that I'd make here is the injury history is something to pay attention to on this player. In year 1, he played for 3 games. In year 3, last year, he played 1 game, had 1 target for 0 yards. So that's the point I want to make here is you just be cautious on the injury perspective, because now he's had 3 years in college, and 2 of those 3 years he didn't play very much. And, coming back from the injury, is he able to work himself into the mix here in a wide receiver room where, yes, he physically might be somebody that's very intriguing for the NFL, but can he get on the field enough to make that case this year in this 4th year against guys that are playing this whole spring and are getting the reps and getting the attempts and everything that you need to see from those players? And so, yes, there's definitely a possibility here, but I guess my point here would just be careful on the injury piece of this, because 2 of the 3 years in college he didn't play because of those injuries.
Yeah, and that's a big deal in my opinion, especially when you're looking at his profile and a lot of the guys going in that 5th round. There are plenty. If this is a true Devy startup, you're looking at some legitimate freshmen in that range. Dallas Wilson might be in there. I don't know. I've been kind of talking about too much. I see him rising a little bit. But there are guys out there when you're looking at the ADP where you can legitimately say, no, that's their guy. Like, I'd rather have that guy based on just value, the rookies, the freshmen, what you're looking for. And again, I think Garrett and that offenses looks fine, but you got to also remember, like Aaron, Barry, and those guys are playmakers. Nick's going to play that role of that big X on the outside. Like, that's perfect there. But Hilton is no slouch. Like, I think Hilton's going to earn some targets there. And they go a ton of 4 wide receiver sets. Trades, the green, their tight ends moving to wide receiver 2 now. So I could see him getting out wide a lot. There's going to be a lot of mouths to feed out there in the bayou. And I think that's going to hurt Nick overall in terms of that. So that's our fade list. That's kind of where we're fading today. Those are some of the guys that we're looking at, like, hey, we could, they can be concerned there. Any final thoughts on the fading, Jay?
Yeah, I reiterate again, these are not players we hate. We don't dislike the players. We're just
Carson
talking
Beck.
about.
I hate Carson Beck, so I'm going to go ahead and just say that. But yeah, go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
They're all, playing college ball so much better than most people can do. They're probably the best players that were on their high school teams. These aren't terrible players. All we're talking about is value here, injury concerns, those points that we brought up in the beginning. So we're not hating on your favorite player. We're not hating on guys that we're not giving them a chance. We're just talking about value in Devy and where you can get them versus, maybe there might be some holes or risks here that you might not be aware of.
See, Jay's too nice. He had to throw that in there because he's worried he's going to get canceled on YouTube. That's what he's worried about. Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is always about that. I mean, we don't hate the player. It's just based on fading and why we're fading. We're just trying to give you an idea of, like, why would we be pivoting off of this guy? Well, this is why, because we see him as being a risk. And again, remember, you want to accumulate check as many boxes as you can from a positive and a negative light and say, okay, where does that line? Because every single, I don't care who it is. And my buddy Dylan, he's in our Discord. I've been friends with him for a long time, and he's played Devy for a long time. He talks about all the time. He's like, I don't care who it is. It could be Arch freaking Manning who could miss. Like, we could miss on him too. There is no surefire prospect in this format. Bijan struggled, right? There was times where like Bijan, oh yeah, no, he's the 101. Travion, we went back and forth on Travion for years. Me and Jay, we were holding out hope. We said, nope, he's our guy. He's going to get that day 2 capital. He did, right? He almost got round 1 capital. But there's plenty of guys where we just missed. We talked about him earlier in the show. Like, it happens. Just understand it's just a value play. It's just like, hey, that's our profile. I'm willing to miss. And sometimes you do miss. But the idea is like, hey, there's so many red flags in that profile. I'm going to trust my process of avoiding this. That's the Carson Beck process. Like, I'm out. Hey, if he bounces back in Miami, congrats to you. But I don't want to take that risk. I'd rather put my eggs in this basket, and that player could still hit, right? That's the great part of the format, is like you could still hit on these guys, especially because you're drafting all throughout college. So that's the rub, as we call it here in California, even though I think that's a Southern thing. But we'll be back next week. We're going to talk Dynasty next week. We're going to be kind of getting into some panic meter stuff, going over some assets that you may or may not like, or in terms of like guys we're a little worried about. Kind of go do some, some news, some breaking news stuff too, as we start to get into camps. I know it's still June, but maybe some news out there in terms of what teams are looking at in terms of their scheme and all of that. So we appreciate you guys. We'll be back. Tune us in next week. Also, go check out our Substack, our Patreon. We're almost to 1,000 subs. We got 20 more subs to go before we hit 1,000 subs on Substack. So go check that out. If you want those player profiles that Jay was talking about, the Dynasty Investor Series, all of that, that's where you can find it.